during those 7 years, I got really lost as a, I didn't feel like I was an artist anymore. I did barely felt like a human, like, and I got completely swept up in, like, just I partied too much. I did too much drugs and I drank too much. And that's that, I'm not going to like sugarcoat that or beat around it and pretend it was anything else.
Hello, welcome to another episode of DNB Raps with myself, Lee UHF. We've got a very special guest who I've been trying to get on the show for quite a few months now. Our diaries have synced up and collaborated nicely for today. It's actually his birthday as well, so he's joining us on the day of birth, just before he goes out, gets on it, gets raked with the family, gets the food down.
Too old for that these days.
You can hear him now. It's none other than my friend Matt Webb, your favourite producer, Mr. Konquest. Matt, how you doing, mate? You good?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm doing really good. As last night, I was in bed by 11 p.m.
Oh, he's a good boy nowadays since I last seen you.
The fun's all on the weekends when the shows are, aren't they, mate? So
that's it, mate. We've got birthday balloons. How old are we today, Matt?
I am 35, but funny enough, the balloon behind me is actually for Yaya. That's Beast Jane's birthday last month. It's still going. He refuses to take it down.
A month-long birthday. And where is the amazing Beast Jane today?
She's at work. Bless her.
Play. No worries, man.
She's cooking me a big dinner later, so I'm looking forward to that big Czech-style dinner.
Excellent stuff. What do they eat in Czech Republic then? What's the? I mean, I've been over there a few times, but I seem to just be eating fucking MacDs and stuff like that when I go there. What's the dish of choice for Czech Republic?
Well, they can make potatoes no matter what they do with potatoes. I don't know what they do, what the secret is, but they seem to make it like taste better than we can. And I'm not even just adding a bit of butter, like their potatoes are amazing. So we actually have, I'll just quickly tell you about a funny little story. So we've got like a group of like fans that come to all our shows in Czech Republic, and they call themselves now the Potato Gang because I pointed this out before. And they come to our shows and they're standing in the crowd like holding signs that say like potato croquette on and stuff. Because one time I said that Czech people make great potato dishes, and last time we played in Cheb, the city of Cheb in the west of Czech Republic, they actually bought us little key rings with potatoes on as gifts.
Oh my god, this is this potato fanatic Neurospuds. We could
which is funny enough exactly what she's cooking me for dinner tonight. Potato salad with schnitzel.
Neurospuds with schnitzel. That's what's on the card tonight. That'd be a good one, actually. If you can think of any more neuro potato puns in the comments, drop them down below. Let's see who can come up with the best ones there. So where are you living at the minute then, Matt? Are you still in Cambridge? I believe it is.
Yes, mate. I am. I'm just north of Cambridge, actually, in the city I actually grew up in called Ely, which is famous for its very big cathedral. Took 909 years to build, actually. That's my I've done the tour so many times I could do it myself.
There's the history lesson. Is that what you're doing on the weekends when you're not gigging? Then you're taking people around for the history lessons.
I may as well do. But no, we're currently, I've actually been studying to do a whole new career at the moment alongside my drum and bass, which is IT security, which I actually just passed my final exam yesterday, the day before my birthday. So my new contract and jobs are in London, so I'm back off to London, back to the big smoke in the coming months.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, it's good to have something to obviously fall back on with that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not DJing in other countries for the most part of it at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, are we? No. So it's good to have that filler in for it.
I like to keep my brain busy, mate.
That's it. And not just music.
No, well, this is the thing. Well, what a lot of people assume Neurofunk producers 24/7 listening to drum and bass, which with me is definitely not the case. Like, for example, if I'm on my way to a gig, I won't listen to drum and bass. I'll listen to everything but, because as much as obviously Neurofunk is my absolute passion, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't still be here 19 years later. But I love classical music and things like that. I like to have my brain a bit of a wind down time before I listen to Neurofunk.
Yeah, Yeah, it can cause burnout as well. I think two occasions through my whole stint. I've been DJing 25 years now, and my whole stint, I've had two occasions where I did it for a living, and on both occasions, I either started to hate what I was doing, or I had a bit of burnout as well. So yeah, it kind of works for me to have a day job and a focus,
Yeah.
and put that in for the rest of the hours as well. You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I think that's true with everybody, to be fair. Like I said, neurofunk is my absolute passion. But if you know, focus it, because when you're in the studio and you're writing, and some days you have good days in the studio, some days you have bad, like you can't always expect creative writing to go well every session. So sometimes, you know, some days I come out of the studio and I've just written what I think is the best tune ever. And some days I come out and I just want to smash my computer to bits. Like,
Yeah, I've
so
heard
you've
that.
got to have that break, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned at the weekends. What were you doing this past weekend? Were you getting up to much?
I was actually out in London, seeing some of my old childhood friends. Actually, it's one of my other childhood friends' birthdays a few days
Ah,
before mine. So we had a gang reunion, actually, from people who I haven't seen really for a few years, but we used to spend every single waking moment together when we were kids. So
I love that. Love
yeah.
that. I didn't know you were in London. I was actually in London myself for the weekend. I
Oh
wish
yeah.
I'd known. I'd have popped over and seen you, but I was playing the SAS residency
Oh yeah.
in Ohio, so I got to do a main room set. And I played a second room set as well, so I got two sets on the night. But
It's
here's one.
probably
What
best you
happens?
didn't see me.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. But no, here's what happens at the weekend. Now you're getting a bit older. You've got this to look forward to. So,
Yeah.
in my first set, playing it, I'm doing the old Jersey Shore fist pump to the tracks. I'm playing it like that, and I fucking pulled my shoulder. I, I've I've done some serious ligament damage, and I weren't going viral. I went like fucking going like this. Like it was more just your general like going for it, and it was like and I had to pull away. So I was like this the rest of the night with it. But you've got that
Bless
to
you.
look forward to when you're at your 40s, Matt.
Uh,
When you're DJing, I'll
I
be up
can't
on the
wait.
Zimmer frame pretty soon, I think. So let's go back to the beginning then. I want to kind of get to know where we all started with Konquest and beyond that as well. But
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about where you where you grew up, should I say, in fact.
Well, like I said earlier, I actually am now living in the city I grew up in. It's a very, you can't really call it a city. It's classified as a city just because it has a cathedral. But yeah, I'm weirdly, I've gone full circle, and I've traveled a lot. I left home when I was 17, and I've lived in so many different places. But yeah, I've kind of gone full circle, and because during those times when I left home and I was DJing around Europe quite a lot, I didn't really speak to my family for a long time, not on purpose, just kind of became distant, lost contact. So since these last couple of years, I've been studying back home at my parents at the moment, and I've been using this time to rekindle those years that I lost, because I realized that you only get so many years with the people you love, and I spent such a long I was gallivanting around Hackney, when I was 17, 18, being a bit of a wild one, all the free parties and squat parties as I was first discovering music. And I got so infatuated with that lifestyle that I definitely feel like I lost contact with a lot of my family. Like I didn't speak to my sister for almost 10 years. Like, so yeah, and I know now I'm about to go back out into the world again. And I feel like I've been using this last year and a half, 2 years to like really connect, especially reconnect with my dad, especially. Our favorite thing to do every day is we make sure we go for a coffee every single day, which is what I'm going to do after this interview, actually.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a given though as well, like in your 20s. I mean, I had some similar experience as well. When I was 21, I'm from Sheffield originally, and I got a girlfriend who was from Leamington Spa. So I moved down here to the Midlands, and I ended up in Coventry for a while. And over the span of like 10 years, I was that heavily involved in doing my music and DJing abroad, similar to yourself as well,
Mhm.
that even though I was speaking to my mom and dad, and I'd probably go and see them once a year, they moved even further up north to Skegness, and there was just no connection to my family. And then around 2013, I went to a wedding and my cousins who I grew up with, and it was very emotional because I felt I'd been out of that, and like I jumped back into the family atmosphere, and it's like it's a
It's
different
overwhelming,
feeling than
isn't it?
friends, isn't it? Yeah, you feel like wow, these people have really got my back, and they're really understand me and know me because they
Yeah.
see me growing up. Whereas all my friends, I'd only known since my 20s, from the music scene and things like that. That was my group of friends. I weren't really in touch with a lot of friends from childhood, but my family I was. So since then, since like a good 10 years now, I've kind of been mad in terms of getting that effort to go and see my family up in Sheffield and that. But he does, innit? You realise that those are the people that you kind of rest upon as well, isn't it?
I tell you what, Lee, I wouldn't have what I have today without them. Like they've stuck behind my music career like fully. When times were good, they were there. When times were bad, they were there. And they're still there now for me. And I think it took me maturing, and it took me realizing, my failure at things. And when you fail, you kind of like, if you fail at something you really, really are passionate about, sometimes it feels like you want to hide away, like, oh, I don't want to, people are going to be disappointed, blah, blah, blah. But, my parents have always been there for me throughout my dream of being a drum and bass producer. And, even though now I'm 35 today, and they're still here, still supporting me. So it made me realize that, no matter what, those people, if they're in your life, they're going to be there for you, right?
Well, you're very self-aware there then, Matt. Like I said, like myself, you've gone back to making sure you're putting that effort in to make sure the family relationships are there as well. But at the same time, going out on yourself like I did, you had a lot of those fails that you had to experience that's probably put you in the mindset of getting back to wanting to have that family connection again as well, isn't it? It does bring you back to that full
What I
circle.
will say is, Neurofunk specifically as a subgenre is definitely one of the most cutthroat industries in drum and bass in terms of, there's not much room at the top, because
It's a
it's
small inner sub
exactly,
scene, isn't it?
exactly. And because of that sub scene culture, there is a small space on the pedestal at the top. So to be up there, you have to be at the absolute top of the game. And like I said, because the competition's so fierce out there has been moments where I've definitely, I thought, fuck this, I can't be bothered with this anymore. But for some reason, that fire in my belly for Neurofunk seems to always creep back up on me, no matter what, how much I think it's the last gig, the last time. It doesn't seem to be, and now it's going better than it ever has been. So
Well, just to touch on that for a minute then, and we'll come back to the younger days in just a second. But one thing that you do seem to see as well with Neurofunk, and you talk about obviously not much room at the top with it, is the acceptance in Neurofunk in the UK. And I've had this conversation on a few of my other interviews. It's widely accepted, obviously, more in Europe as mass drum and bass, whereas if Neurofunk was back in 1993, when you had multi-genre raves and things like that, and it was more accepted, it'd be okay. But now it seems to not. It's been put into a little box on the side, all on its own, and you rarely even see a Neurofunk set on, like, say, a DNB All Stars lineup. There's only Noisia that's really done it. Why do you think it's grew to that? Whereas obviously back in the day, it definitely wasn't the case. But in the UK, it's so segregated now.
well, I mean, that is a very complicated subject we could talk about for hours. I mean, myself, coming from a legal rave scene, that they were, for me, they were very multi-genre. You'd go to a free party and you had no idea what was going to be played. It was just, but that eclectic sense of like fellowship was what opened me up really to the darker side of music and drum and bass anyway, because, and I just feel like those days really shaped me who I am. But I will say, in terms of like coming on to what you were saying about how, the UK as it stands, like, I play in Europe and I play in the UK. I'm one of the few Neurofunk producers who's very lucky that I get to do both, because I know it's very, very difficult to get gigs as a Neurofunk producer inside the UK. But it's funny, everywhere I go in Europe, and I speak and I meet people, in all these different countries, they're always like, oh wow, I can't wait to come to the UK to play, because it's kind of like, it's the mecca of drum and bass, isn't it? But what they don't realize is that I feel that Europe has overtaken us now in terms of the production of their events and how many events there are, how many people are willing to go to those kind of events. But don't get me wrong, Britain still has a hugely strong culture of drum and bass, but I feel like Neurofunk has definitely kind of been left in the dust in this country a little bit. I mean, you've got like Bristol, which I still play in quite regularly, still flying the flag and obviously London as well. But Bristol seems to be at the moment like so hyper focused around particular crews. Like I'm very good friends with Kelvin 373, who runs Born on Road. He's actually in my Warzone squad, and we play together daily. So you know, I'm still very aware of all the other drum and bass crews and labels and nights and events in the country. But Britain has, you know, you could go out in Bristol on a Friday and Saturday night, and it's not like some countries, they're very like, oh, gatekeepy, or we're doing the drum and bass night this weekend. You go to Bristol, it's like, oh, well, there's 12 nights on anyway, so you know, everyone has a little piece of that pie. So I feel like England at the moment is a mass melting pot. Other countries, especially Czech Republic, they have, you know, they're hyper focused on Neurofunk events and dark drum and bass. But in England, it's still like free for all the different subgenres at the minute. So
yeah,
you know, that's how I feel about the UK at the moment as a scene.
I mean, there is very few that are putting Neurofunk DJs on a multi-genre drum and bass lineup, though. I mean, I not to, you know, blow my own horn, but I think I'm probably one of the last people to actually do it. And we stopped doing events a couple of years ago. We had a just like I say, just a bit of a rough year, and I wanted to take a bit of time off from it. So now it just seems like, I mean, if you're looking at the big events, you know, why is there not one Neurofunk set, just one on, say, a DNB All Stars lineup? There's the room for it. They can do it, and if you start putting those little sets in here and there, you probably are going to get a bit more acceptance for it. But it just seems like there's a lot of reluctance towards it, doesn't it?
Well, this is how I feel about it, Lee. I've realized that, and this is not in any way to say that, you know, people who follow crowds or trends, you know, they can't think for themselves. But what you have to realize is that what I've realized is that the subculture of drum and bass is very much like we move in units with you know, it's very close-knit communities. And so trends and, you know, waves of new genres and things, they happen so fast, people get swept up in them. And, you know, it's not like, I don't think Neurofunk is purposefully excluded in those scenes. I just feel like, especially since COVID, if you're an event manager or a label manager, you know, everybody got hit so hard over COVID now that I feel, and obviously so many venues shut, I feel that like people, they know that their formula works. What, for example, Born on Road have, you know, winning, not the last 2 years, they won best label at Drum and Bass Awards. So, you know, they've got a formula that they know is working. So you can't, I don't blame people for going with what they love and that they know works for their business. So it would be very easy for me to sit here and be all butthurt that we don't get more bookings. But I do feel that Neurofunk is slowly coming back, like, because it's had such huge success in Europe over the last few years with people like Darkshire and Let It Roll.
The formula works. I mean, look at Boomtown main stage, and
yeah, well, exactly.
You know what I mean? It works. It works. It's like, for me, I just feel like some of these extra large promoters that put in these huge festivals on, covering every subgenre, I think there's a level of responsibility to have that kind of inclusion for some other things. It's like, honest to God, it's like if I see a DNB All Stars lineup and there's two great Neurofunk acts on, I'm probably going to go to that just because of that. Do you know what I mean? So, and all they've got to do is maybe knock off two other headliners that they've already got 10 to 15 of that sound anyway. I think the bigger ones, I mean, like I say, Boomtown is a great example, isn't it?
Oh yeah, of course.
It works. It does work, but nobody else seems to be.
Well, as I'm sure we'll talk about further on in this interview, my relationship with Boomtown, you know, the respect I have for those guys and the things they do, because they are. But I mean, you have to remember though, they have the power to be inclusive. Because when you're such a formidable and respected force like Boomtown team are, you know, if they say we're going to put this. So, for example, I remember when I'm friends with Wonka, who's the director of electronic music at the festival, and you know, when he said, right, you know, imagine you've had this same formula of drum and bass and dirty techno and hardcore for years, and then you think, right, I'm going to put house on for the first time to a load of crusty ravers, right? And, you know, obviously there was quite a lot of worry that would have a backlash. And when the lineup come out at first, it did. But as soon as everyone was there at the festival and this brand new tech house stage had appeared, the vibes were amazing. And then after that, nobody ever said a word again. Do you know what I mean? So when you have that kind of platform, and that kind of power and influence, I suppose it's much easier to kind of open up people to new kinds of music, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, like you said, a bit more about Boomtown a little bit later on. So I'm going to jump back into obviously where we started and talking
Yeah,
about you growing
yeah,
up
yeah.
in Cambridge. You were playing a lot of instruments from a very young age, so you kind of had that level of almost maturity in your brain of how music is composed.
Yeah.
What influenced you to start getting into that, and what kind of music were you drawn to back then?
So, I mean, my grandfather, my mum's dad, he's actually from Birmingham, and he was a big band jazz drummer in the 60s and
Ah,
early
right.
70s.
Big in
And
Birmingham that was back then.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he was actually in a band with John Bonham from Led Zeppelin's dad, and which is our like claim to fame. And he taught me, I remember very specifically, I was 8 years old, and he taught me how to do a paradiddle, which is a drum pattern on his legs. And he was like, you know, he could barely stand up. He was a heavy smoker, so he's not very mobile. And I'd never seen him move quick before. And he showed me how to do a paradiddle on his lap, like when he was sitting in his chair, drinking his whiskey, smoking his fags. And I was just like, holy crap, like I've never even seen you barely move to walk to the fridge, and you've just, your hands just like moved at a speed I've never seen before. And that was fascinating to me. And I just loved the idea of rhythm and accents and stuff like that. And so, yeah, from like a couple of weeks later, he gave me his drum kit, still with original pigskin heads from the 50s. And he said, you know, I don't play anymore. He gave that to me, and I started drum lessons actually with the drummer from the band Elbow. I don't know if you've heard of them, Alex Reeves. He was my first drum teacher, and yeah, so I started playing drums, and I absolutely loved it. And my favorite drummer in the whole world at the time was Joey Jordison from Slipknot. And he was like my biggest inspiration as a drummer, obviously, along with my granddad. So I started to play the drums at school, like in bands and stuff. I actually played my sister's prom. She's a few years older than me, and I was the drummer for her prom. So that's kind of where my love of music started. And I've actually got like a quick funny story to tell you about how, because obviously I moved on from drums to piano. And so I became fascinated with classical piano because my school had a Steinway piano, like bloody expensive piano that none of us were allowed to touch. And when I started doing my GCSEs in year 10, I started doing art, and I hated art. I hated it so much because I'm colorblind. So I kept getting in trouble with my teachers, and I just didn't really listen, blah, blah, blah. So I dropped it. And when you drop a subject at my school, you were supposed to go sit in the library during those 3 lectures a week. You'd go sit in the library and study, or like draw on books and mess around, which is basically what everybody did. So I set up this elaborate lie that the art teacher had said to the principal that during those lessons I could study piano on this grand piano in the school hall. And I told him that that's what she said, and I told her that that's what he'd said. So, and it took them 2 years to figure out that neither of them had actually given me that permission. And on my very last week of school, they both walked up to me, and by this point I'd been practicing like 3 hours a week every week, and I'd actually learned, and I composed those really amazing pieces. And like, they came out and sat down and were like, young man, we've discovered what you've been up to these last 2 years. You have detention till the end of term, but also brilliant piano playing. We're so proud of you. So that's where like my kind of music all comes from. That's like where it originated. When me started playing instruments, piano and drums. They were my first love.
Oh, that's a great story, mate. Absolutely fantastic. And did that carry on into obviously
Yeah.
all
I
and
I
onwards
still
as
play
well?
now. I still play piano. Got a piano right in front of me right here.
Brilliant.
That's where a lot of the stuff I'm doing now, which we'll talk about later, like the more creative side of drum and bass. I'm so glad that I started with musical instruments, because I know so many amazingly technically gifted producers. Well, you know, when it comes to being like a total sound design nerd, they're miles above me. But then they'll turn around and say to me, "Oh, you know, Matt, what scale is this?" You know, something I learned when I was 10, that people who can out synthesize me any day still don't know their scales. Like, you know, so there's people forget how beneficial it is to actually start with the basic music theory before you jump into being a technical wizard.
For sure. And then you do dabble obviously in vocals, as we've heard recently on a couple of tracks, and we'll get into that later. But when did you start getting into the singing side of it? Has that always been there as well?
Do you know what? It's always been there, like privately. I've always enjoyed singing, but I've never done it publicly. And then during COVID, when we were all losing our minds, I I thought, you know what, I'm just going to tear the band-aid off and I'm going to post a video of me singing. I did a piano cover of Creep by Radiohead, and I thought, do you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to show Facebook, show all my followers, and see what happens. And it's to this day, it's the most liked video I've ever had, that I've ever posted. It got like 1,000 likes.
It's daunting, isn't it? It's daunting because it's a weird thing. It's like you're almost very much exposed when you're singing, aren't you? You feel naked.
Vulnerable.
So to do that in front of somebody, and let alone obviously out there, you're always going to think you're not good enough, because obviously, it's a very different muscle you're using than obviously playing an instrument. And you can, in a way, you can kind of hide behind the instrument in a way, can't you? And you're very exposed that way. But yeah, I mean, obviously fair play for you putting it out there like that and jumping on it, and obviously having a bit of a good response. It does egg you on a little bit, doesn't it, to maybe try it a little bit more and get a bit more creative.
From that video, I then released a couple more videos of me playing and singing piano. And then one day, Dan from Volatile Cycle turned around and said, why don't you give something to me that we can do with drum and bass with those vocals? And at the time I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, don't be ridiculous. They're just, a couple of videos I put on Facebook. And he was like, no, but I really think we can do something with this. So that's where the idea for the track Drowning came about, with Dan telling me that he thinks I should sing for drum and bass, which obviously at the time I thought he'd lost his mind. But here we are 3 years later after that moment, and Vegas from Bad Company actually signed it to his label Bad Taste. So what started as like a completely harebrained, fleeting moment of thought has now turned into my first actual vocal release on a very well-respected label. So unexpected things can happen.
Yeah, the track you're talking about, Drowning, obviously, definitely one of my favorite drum and bass tracks over the last few years. The singing and obviously the track itself, it has a vibe of, there was an old, I can't remember if it was Evil Intent remixed it or it was a Spore remix, but there was a big vocal track that involved something of those two guys, and it does have like kind of those high notes as well that you hit on it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what it is. Let me have a quick look. Hold on.
Go for it.
Evil Intent Spore remix. Let's see. It's going to drive me mad if I don't. There we go.
Is it which one? What's it called?
It's Evil Intent featuring Blip, Flip Side. On the flip side.
Oh yeah.
It's got that vibe to it, and that is one of my favorite drum and bass tracks of all time. I think the punk-esque style vocals, I think they are so underutilized in drum and bass, and this is why, like I say, the Drowning track and your new one, Sin Sister, those two tracks, they appeal to me a lot. They're two of my favorites at the moment because they've got that vibe, and I was crazy for Flip Side.
Well, I tell you what, Vegas from Bad Company said that I sound like the lead singer of the White Stripes, and he was like, I think what he's getting at is that I'm well aware that some people who have just been singing their whole lives and they're really I'm not professionally trained in any way, and sometimes my vocals are quite gritty, and also in Neurofunk it's a new idea, a new concept of there being like a male vocalist. Obviously you have lots of MCs and very good rappers, but the idea of like a man trying to sing emotionally over Neurofunk is quite unheard of. And I'm well aware that I'm not a perfect singer, and I think that what makes me unique in that aspect is that when I sing, it's still quite raw, it's very gritty, it's not over processed. And I think because Neurofunk is so over processed sometimes, it's a nerd's game, Neurofunk. So I'm kind of adding a little bit of edge, I feel, in our tracks. Either that or it's just an excuse for my bad singing.
It's definitely got it, mate. Like I said, straight away, as soon as I heard it, that appealed to me straight away. And it's definitely, like you said, male vocals. I think they're underutilized in these types of sounds. It brings it a different sound, because the ones we're all used to is like reggae vocals and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
We're overrun with that. We need, like I say, we need a bit of punk in there and things like that as well. Do you know what I mean? Even a bit of harmony and stuff wouldn't go amiss. Do you know what I mean? Just some different things. But yeah, I think those two tracks, they're very underappreciated. I know Sin Sister's only just come out, but I think those are where a direction needs to be, I think, with a lot of the music. Absolutely, when it comes to the vocals. So when did you first get a taste of dance music?
Oh my god. Right. So I mean, well, I'm an '89 baby, so like I grew up in the era of tape packs, innovation, things like that. Obviously, being in secondary school, everybody's got tape packs. Everybody's listening to like Skibber, Shabba, the innovation, and I can't remember the name of Helter Skelter, things like that. But when I was 14, I went on holiday with two of my friends who are slightly older than me. I think they were like 17 at the time. And they were like, oh yeah, we went to Newquay, and they were like, we're going to go to this club night, this drum and bass club night. And I'd never been to a club night in my life, obviously. And I was 14 at the time, nearly 15. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to get in anyway. So
What
I was
year was
like,
this?
pardon?
What year was this?
I couldn't tell you. So I would have been, that would have been 2003 or 4, one or the other. I can't remember. But yeah, so we were in Newquay. We went to this bar called the Cooler Bar. I remember it so vividly. It was DJ SS was playing. And I remember I was standing in the queue thinking, there's just no way I'm going to get in. I just look like a baby. I've barely got a beard. Like, anyway, so I stood, like I hid behind my two older mates who were taller than me and just kind of like bum rush squeezed through like as they went through. And next thing you know, I was in the club at 14 years old. And I remember I walked towards the front of the decks, and I got my first proper taste of, seeing a live DJ in a club with I never heard speakers so loud in my life. And I remember just thinking, like, immediately at that moment, I want to fucking do that. I was like, I want to do that. Seeing the way that he commanded the crowd, and like whatever action he did, everybody would follow. And like, I just thought, to capture a moment like that and capture a crowd and have them under your command, I just thought that was just the coolest thing ever. So yeah, that was my first proper taste.
What was your music taste going into that then?
Do you know what? I'm a massive classical music guy. Like, but I am quite eclectic, really. I like all types of music. But
is that the same growing up though as well before the rave?
Yes. Like, so for example, when I was 10, my older sister, she's 2 years older than me. She had a boyfriend who was really into a band called Slipknot, and they were just at the time starting to become a thing. And I was a rollerblader at the time. I used to aggressive rollerblade, and I bought a hoodie that had the word Slipknot on, and I didn't even know what Slipknot was like at the time. And my sister was like, "Poser, like you don't even know what that is." I was like, "Yeah, I do. It's a skate brand." And she was like, "No, it's not, you idiot. That's Slipknot." And obviously, then my next port of call was to go and research what Slipknot was. And I just started drumming as well at the time. And like I mentioned earlier, I discovered Joey Jordison, who is, like, in my opinion, the greatest metal drummer of all time. Rest his soul. And yeah, like, so for me, I was quite opposite ends of the spectrum because I was super into classical piano and always have been. Like, I still attend quite a lot of classical piano concerts now. But I was also like, a year later, my dad took me to my first Slipknot concert at the Birmingham NEC on their Iowa tour. And so, I would go from extremes of like, really dark metal, and then I'd go home and put on some classical piano. So I feel like what attracts me is things that are technically brilliant. The same way that classical music is extremely technical. But then again, so is metal. So is, death metal is a new metal, a lot of like harder metal styles, like the drumming in it is super duper technical. So I try not to be too close-minded about my music, but as long as if I find someone has done a feat that I deem impressive, I'm generally attracted to it,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And it's like with that transition as well from other styles of music, there's got to be something that really appeals, I feel, that's relevant to what you were already into. Like when I first got into it, funnily enough, I was on holiday as well. I was in Skegness with my parents, and I had some friends from Lincoln who were a little bit older than me. And my friend in Lincoln, he had Vibe tapes. He loved Vibe. He had a Vibe tattoo and everything like that for the rave. It was constantly hounding me to go, and I'm like, I'm not listening to that shit. I love gangster rap. I was into Wu-Tang and Onyx and Mobb Deep and stuff like that, all the East Coast stuff. So he was like, fucking not, I don't want that happy hardcore shit. Fuck that. Like, I'm not doing that. And eventually he got me to go by inviting these girls I was trying to get with on the holiday to go. So I ended up going. But when I actually went there, I actually enjoyed it. I mean, granted, obviously I was chasing tail all night, but I enjoyed it. It was good. And when I come home, and I went back to school, I found that everybody was going to a weekly, like, hardcore, like, rave night in Sheffield, and there was MCs on. And obviously, like in gangster rap, I got into the MCs first, and it kind of had that transition. I suppose that transition for you really was the drums, wasn't it, as well? You
Yeah.
know, obviously that early drum and bass, then it was very heavy drum orientated as well, even if you're going down that route.
Yes.
So do you see the transition yourself with that?
100%.
Is that what it was?
100%. Listen, a lot of the people I collaborate with today are just like, oh, go on, do them drums, will you? Like, because I've taken my knowledge as a drummer for 15 years into drum and bass. You know, I know a lot about the technicalities of playing the drums, why an accent is important, why ghost notes are important, why timbre is important. And I took my knowledge from playing the drums into drum and bass, and also my you know, my experience playing classical piano. So when I work very, very closely with like quite a lot of great producers now, and in the collaborations we do, you know, we all have our roles, right? I often am focusing on like a big cinematic intro of lots of classical instruments, and I often focus on a lot of the drums because they're my strong points, and everybody knows it. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, Matt, go on, can you just write us this awesome like classical intro?" I'm like, "Yeah, go on then," because I find that that's my forte. I find that easy to do and enjoyable. But you know, I know that I have my weak points in making drum and bass. You know, I know I need to get down to the nitty gritty a little bit more with maybe my bass synthesis and things like that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you work at your craft, you will always have strengths. And my strengths that I utilize today with my collaborations definitely come from my childhood of piano and drums, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, talking about collaborations there, and we've just mentioned two of yours. I do want to talk about that, and we'll jump into it a bit now. So, do you feel that you will be doing a lot more collaborations? Because it's very interesting what you say there about obviously strong points and weak points. We had Lemmy Dubs, the drum and bass producer, on one of his interviews, and when we interviewed him last year, he'd not done any collabs at all. He was about to do one, and we re-interviewed him recently. And he's on it now. He's like, my God, I didn't think I could do it, because he has autism. He suffers from autism,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to let a tune go with it. But he found a way to do it, and he's on a roll now. He's collabing with absolutely everybody. So are we going to be seeing that a lot more from you? And do you see a lot more importance in it? And
Yes, I mean,
differences?
I understand the gatekeeping of your own production in the beginning, because sometimes it's very hard to open yourself up to collaboration because you're worried, oh, they're going to be better than me, or I'm not going to be able to share my toys nicely, you know, because it's what I've learned from collaboration is that compromise, because in the beginning I used to see compromise as jeopardizing my production, like, oh well, I wanted it to go this way, blah blah blah. But over time, as I've realized, is those compromises have turned into some of the best music I've ever written. Learning to play nicely with others, because like growing up, I was always quite a control freak of everything. Like I was like, no, my dad's like an engineer, and he's always been like, oh, everything has to be logical and done this way, kind of thing. Like, you know, so I was like, oh no, if I open this up to other people, there's like, these are going to be weak points, and it could make everything go wrong. But actually the collaborations I've done are definitely the best pieces of music I've ever written. And in terms of future, I have some very, very exciting projects coming up with Volatile Cycle and Drop Set, as an American-based neurofunk producer. And we have been given an amazing platform. Thank you very much to a special mention to Magnitude and Task Horizon, who have given us this platform with their label Evolution Chamber. We have some really, really exciting projects about to be announced in a couple of weeks, actually. But don't worry, it's all kosher to say this now. I did check. But yeah, we've got some really, really amazing. We work really well together, and this kind of like little trio of us producing, it's kind of like a rebirth of a project I was in with Volatile Cycle and Barbarics. We were called Fourth Order. Barbarics had to step away from drum and bass due to his own reasons, his own personal reasons. He is now making garage and house music, which he's doing very, very well at, and he seems very, very happy. And he's always welcome to collaborate with us again at any time in the future. But he's doing his own thing now. And I understand you two have been friends for quite a few years as well, haven't you?
Yeah. I was going to talk to you obviously about Steve. I've not spoke to him a lot in the last few years and stuff, but obviously life gets in the way, as you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know Steve Barbarics from around, I'd say around 2005. When I met him, he had like yellow
I've seen the
furry
pictures.
boots on
I've
and
seen
stuff.
the pictures.
That's when I first met Steve. Was into the hard house and the hardcore, and then I just started doing drum and bass. So he kind of started gravitating over there, and he was doing some dubstep. And yeah, obviously around that time, in the first few years I met him, he had a massive hit with Printer Jam on Hospital
Yeah,
Records,
yeah.
doing that, and then obviously at some point he linked up with you guys as well. But before we obviously get to that, your first exposure or people being exposed to yourself was under your Block Dodger name, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
what year did that name come around, and what does that name mean as well?
Oh, God. So out of the 19 years I've been doing this, Block Dodger was nearly 16 of them. Like that came around because when I was younger, I was heavily involved in illegal parties. We had a sound system of our own, which as soon as I was literally 18, as soon as I was allowed, out of control of my parents, I was like, right, I'm buying an illegal sound system. I'm doing illegal raves. So that was like the first thing I saved for. And my very first sound system actually went by the name of Guillotine. We did lots of parties in East Anglia and London. And when I think I was 18, I just turned 18, just got the sound system. I didn't DJ at the time. I had already started producing, but I didn't DJ. I just did the sound system for events. But I actually worked a weekend job at the time in John Lewis in Cambridge. And I remember I was like totally hanging out my ass one day, like just, gone to sit in the toilet and pretend I'm having a shit for ages, but I'm actually just nursing my hangover. And I remember sitting on the toilet thinking, I'd love to be a DJ, but what would I call myself? So the name Block Dodger came about because of the sound system name. Like if during like the time when the guillotine came around, like during the French Revolution, I believe people who avoided having their head placed upon the block to have the head chopped off were known as block dodgers because they escaped having their head chopped off by the guillotine. And that's where the whole idea for that name came about, because obviously I wanted to be associated with my sound system. And so I actually gained the success I gained in a more commercial and legally viable way, all stemmed from my love of illegal raves. So obviously, I think it's a natural progression, right? Because I know so many sound system owners over the last 20 years from Bristol and London, etc., well, all over the country. And it seems that like if you own a sound system, eventually you will end up DJing on that sound system. It's inevitable. Basically, I never set out to be a DJ, but the bug, seeing everybody else constantly doing it and having all the equipment, is like inevitable. At one point someone's like, cool, I'll spin a few tunes, and then the next thing you know, you just. So I used that platform I had with Guillotine, all the illegal raves. It's such a big networking thing, and at the time as well, like a few years later, Facebook was invented. And we were taking our sound system across the country. Every weekend we'd meet a whole new different crew. Oh, we're from Bristol, we're from Brighton, we're from Manchester. They're all putting on, as what to fund the illegal raves, they were putting on local club nights. So it's like, oh, I'll book you, you book me. And then obviously with the invention of social media, and it's not just like, oh, sending someone a text. I can send 200 people a message just like that. And when that started to, social media really started to take off, that's when I started getting success under the name Block Dodger, because we were all collaborating with each other around the country with our sound systems. And then over the years, I started to get more and more successful. And then I realized that I dropped this whole sound system thing. I sold my sound system, and I realized that I just wanted to be a DJ producer, because like that became my absolute 100% goal, and still is to this day. Like that's why I wanted to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, sound systems nowadays, if you look at the bigger picture of it, they have kind of, in a way, the majority of the big and successful ones have morphed into some of the bigger festivals. Because again, you go to Glastonbury, you go to Boomtown, it's basically those festivals are a selection of huge sound systems, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're all sound systems there. So obviously that's more on the legal side of it. But what we found over the last few years as well is obviously a lot of sound system. There's a lot of bad press for it as well. I mean, not that there was any ever good press for an illegal sound system, but within, let's say, within rave culture and that, it's a little bit frowned upon because of obviously the trouble that's reported there and the deaths and things like that. So is this a reality, you think? Do you think the general illegal sound system, do you think it's fading out? Do you think there is still some good ones out there? Or do you think there's anything that might need to change to revitalize it a bit?
So you just said exactly what I would come on to respond to that question, is that some of the biggest and most successful profitable companies operating legally today all started out in the same boat as illegal sound systems. And what people need to realize is, and what, you know, governing bodies of authority of, you must be this loud, you must turn off at this time, yada yada yada, like all the legalities and formal rules behind it, they wouldn't have any of these events without the troublemakers in the or what they deem as the troublemakers in the first place. You know, I don't want to go on, you know, to talk about, you know, Boomtown's background or whatever. I'm sure they want to keep that private themselves. But the reality is, I work very closely with people at Glastonbury and Boomtown, and we all come from that special place of, you know, free underground parties in the first place. And without those special moments growing up, and, you know, maybe the odd warehouse was broken into and, you know, the odd farmer's gate was smashed off or whatever, but without those moments, you wouldn't have these massively successful, profitable companies in the entertainment industry today, which is, you know, and because, you know, Great Britain is very famous for its events and festivals, live music, things like that. But the reality is that all those things that make the music industry great in this country is that they all came from the underground, and that's just a fact. Like, they can ignore it as much as they want and pretend that's not the case, but that is the reality.
Yeah. So I was saying, obviously, because of the bad press and the almost like there's almost a tarnishing to the name of illegal sound systems because of deaths and trouble and things going on like that. Do you think there's anything they can do to actually change at the moment to kind of bring it back a little bit more again?
Do you know what? I feel, because I've seen the real underbelly of like those scenes, and the reality is that accidents are going to happen. You know, when things aren't regulated, when there's not, you know, mountains of security and police, those events have to be policed solely by the people in, you know, responsible for running it, which sometimes can get overwhelming. And it doesn't matter, you know, for example, think like I grew up around Strawberry Fair in Cambridge, very famous day festival that, you know, has, you know, it's basically a big party all day. And it doesn't matter, what I've realized is, it doesn't matter how much police you throw at that event, these things are always going to happen. And it's very easy for, you know, the media to, because what they'll say is they'll take illegal raves or illegal parties and be like, oh, look how dangerous they are, blah, blah, blah. But if you actually look at the statistics, right, the deaths will occur whether it's an illegal event or a legal event. It's just that what on paper, one's, you know, one pays taxes, one doesn't. Like, but I understand that, you know, if you've never been to these kind of events before, especially the illegal ones, it, you know, it's very daunting and can seem like scary places. But the reality is that most of the people running those events, yes, troublemakers do turn up, yes, there are incidents, but the 99% of the people running those events are absolutely some of the most lovely people who you'll ever meet in your life, with some of the biggest sense of community going I've ever experienced in the events industry. So it just gets bad press because of the odd idiot, which is just the same with absolutely everything.
Yeah. No, you're fully right there, Matt. I fully agree with you with that. And there are still some good sound systems out there that are not operating at obviously a legal level that are still very good, aren't they? And
oh, absolutely. Some of the best sounding rigs I've ever played off are definitely not supposed to be where they were at the time.
Yeah. There's a big one that's going around Spain as well that's at the moment, and that is absolutely huge. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to.
Oh man, there's so many.
I'll have to put a little picture of it here after I'm editing the video. But yeah, that is a huge one that's going around, and I think they've got a big scene as well out of the UK, haven't they? With the
yes, well, I mean, this country was very, you know, we have Spiral Tribe to thank in this country for, you know, bringing the whole culture of like free rave and, you know, the traveling community, things like that together. And one of my first jobs is, I was very fortunate when I left university. I studied studio engineering. I got a job with a company called Noise Control Audio, which is a speaker manufacturer. And as it turns out, that all the people that started that company they were all from London free rave scene, and they were all old sound systems from Spiral Tribe, Bedlam, Headfuck sound system, who were like my bosses all of a sudden, you know. And it's quite a funny relationship because, you know, we're in a professional work environment now. You know, I'm at work, it's the 9 to 5 or whatever, but the reality is that they're at heart, they were still all old ravers. Like, so it was quite hard to balance the work, you know, the work and play environment, because really they're still just big kids, but with even bigger sound systems.
Fair play. Yeah, I think the best sound system in it is an illegal rave that I've played on. It is actually a Spanish one in Malaga. So there is a promoter out there called Joker Promotions, and he is from the UK. I believe he's from Bristol. Great guy called Chris. If you're watching this, Chris, hello, love you lots. He basically, him and his partner, they own a mountain. They own a mountain in Malaga. Basically, it's a piece of land, and they built a house on it, and they just throw 4-day illegal raves on there. Nobody bothers them because they're miles out of the city, out of Malaga. So it is just Spanish people that go to it. But I've played for them on a few times. They call it the Unstable Asylum, because it is like a horse. They've got horses there and everything. So you're raving and you're walking around. There's just horses walking around while you're raving and stuff like that. But it is, yeah. I'll show some pictures when I edit it here. But it is that's probably one of my favourites that I played at. Just sat getting mashed up with Benny Page on a hill in Malaga. That was pretty good.
We had a similar one when I was in my early 20s. I used to play annually at a free festival in Portugal called Frequency. And I went over there many times to play for them, and it was like a combination of the local Portuguese sound systems and some of the big sound systems from Bristol and London would meet up and hold this big free festival. And yeah, like I said, even though I've played all over Europe in all these amazing big clubs and legal festivals, some of the best and most memorable like feelings of community within, you know, underground music have been these illegal free festivals, because you can just there's not many legal events that can capture that kind of magic that you know, those moments you share as the sun rises with people you just met 2 hours ago, but you're acting like you've all been hanging around the last 10 years together, you know. And I feel like that's what those kind of music events create, that legal events definitely struggle to capture that same magic. That's my opinion.
Well, as we were saying earlier, you made your name Block Dodger through all these free parties as well. And from that, you lent into the production side of it. Now, I believe, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, your first release was on Metaphysics. I believe it was a track called Hell's Tone. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
How did that come around, and how long were you making music before that release came out?
So I'd been making music for about 4 years before that came out. I was living in London at the time. I was living in Hackney Wick, and as I'm sure many of the listeners will know, there was a very famous night emerging at the time called Therapy Sessions, and they used to they used to hold a night on Wednesdays at Club Herbal on Old Street in London, and it was Wednesday Therapy Sessions, which is where that whole brand started.
I played there. That was one of my first drum and bass gigs.
Oh, really?
I started doing the Birmingham Therapy Sessions there as well.
No way.
Yeah, DJE and
well, I'm actually about to release on his label, actually. I'm still friends with DJE today, actually. It's funny, when he first contacted me about doing music for him, I was like, bro, I used to sneak into Herbal underage and watch you every Wednesday. So yeah, I used to so Therapy Sessions is where I got my real proper first drive to I really wanted to be part of the label run by Dylan and Robin, Freak Recordings, you know, which had people like Tech Hitch and Lime Wax and
Obscene as well. Obscene, label. That was so good.
But I'd just written this track, Hell's Tone, and I was too scared to send it to those guys because I was like, I just didn't think I was quite there yet. And at the time, I was very fortunate that Freak Recordings had an artist called the Sect, who was releasing with them at the time. And I used to send endless demos to Dave from the Sect, Dave Edwards, and big ups to Dave, by the way. And he used to give me feedback on all my tracks. And I got to a point where I was just like sending him endless stuff, and he was just like, I was getting so frustrated, like, why don't you just tell me it's good? Like, and something that sticks with me to this day is that he was like, Matt, if I told you every time you'd sent me something that was good but it wasn't great, that it was amazing, you would become complacent and you wouldn't strive to be better. He's like, I tell you the truth because that's what's best for you. And it's funny, right? Because I'll come back to what we were originally talking about in a sec, but I have to tell you this. But like a few years later, I got signed to German Neurofunk label Trusted Music. I have the poster right next to me now. I keep it right next to me because it's the first taste of success I ever had. And they booked me for their 5-year anniversary label party in Berlin at Club Magdalena. And weirdly enough, Dave from the Sect had moved to Berlin at the time, and he came down to the club night where I played one of my first big international gigs. And while I was on the decks, he just walked up to me and he was just like, I knew you could do it, mate. And like, that sticks with me because he was one of the first people, some kid just messaging him tunes like out of the blue, like, ugh, what a fucking headache. Like, and he didn't palm me off. He answered my questions and he listened to my tunes. So I have so much respect to Dave from the Sect because he was one of my first real mentors in drum and bass. So I just thought I'd give him a big shout out.
Yeah, Dave's a great guy. He used to play for us a lot at some of our, well, like I say, when I was doing therapy sessions, Birmingham, and obviously when we started the Raw Nights, he was always helping out. And he's the type of guy that you have a bad night, he'd be like, yeah, don't worry, just give me a bit of fuel money and stuff like that. So he really helped us out
He's
a lot.
too nice for his own good.
Nice guy. He's such a nice guy. And but yeah, he used to send us a lot of music as well. So when I was up and coming DJ, I think he gave a lot of people support, took a lot of people under his wing as well. And I mean, he's still out there as well. I still speak to him every now and again. He's always grabbing the pro right.
I just thought I'd quickly pop this in as well. I've had the privilege of remixing one of his latest tracks under his new alias, Section 63, which will be coming out on Attic Records at some point this year. So yeah, all these 20 years later, big ups to Dave. I've just done a remix of one of his latest tracks. So, but what I wanted to quickly come back to was you asked me about Hell's Tones. So obviously Dave being one of my biggest influences when I was younger, and all of Therapy and Freak Recordings, I was too scared to send my music to Dylan, as in, Dylan who ran the label and ran the night. And a few years later, it just came up in conversation that he'd actually heard Hell's Tune and was going to ask if he could sign it to Freak. And he was like, and then he realized it had been signed to Metaphysic, and he was like, and it was too late. And I was like, damn. So all these years later, I realized I could have sent it to him in the first place and I would have got on Freak. But, you live and learn from those mistakes, don't you? Sometimes I have too much confidence. Sometimes you don't have enough. Like,
fair play. Who ran Metaphysic then? Who ran that label?
So that was there was two guys, Ogonek and Ku. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I never actually met him in person.
Ku is the right one.
So there was Ogonek, which was was Ku's like partner in crime at the time, from Bulgaria, and Ogonek started up this label called Metaphysic, and I just thought, and it was the similar kind of vibe as Freak Recordings, very industrial sounding drum and bass, and I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to give it a whirl. I'm going to give it a punt and see what happens. And then a couple of months later, I had my first ever release, 2010, Hell's Tone. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I've finally made it. Like, my first track out on an international label. Like at the time I was totally stoked, and I'm very grateful for them to give me that opportunity at the time, because, when no one's ever heard of you before, and you're sending out your first, I must have sent out 200 demos at least, and probably got a reply from 3, and 2 of them were no, and 1 of them was yes. It's what I would say to people who are listening. If you are like starting out as a producer, like, you have to realize that people are going to shit on you in the first place. That is just, you have to earn your stripes. You have to earn them badges and them medals, because it's such a, the industry is so saturated. Everybody would love to be the next Noisia, but what I've learned, it took a long, don't get me wrong, the first time I got rejected, it feels like a punch in the stomach, because you think, oh, that's the best tune ever, I've just written the greatest thing ever, because you're in your own little bubble, right? But it soon becomes apparent that what you think is amazing is actually not. And it's hard to admit that to yourself, right? And I still struggle with that to this day, is sometimes admitting that you need to go back to the drawing board and do a bit more studying it's quite hard, especially when you've been in the industry as long as I have. Even today, I'm like, oh man, I'm just not quite there yet, you know? So I think the biggest thing that took me to realize for my own progression is realize that you're not always where you think you are.
Yeah, for sure. And you had a barrage of releases over the next couple of years, didn't you? As well as Block
Yeah.
Dodger right up until 2013. But from then up until about 2019, there seems to be no input from Block Dodger production wise. What happened over those few years until well, I know it was until 2019, which we'll come into. But where was the productions happening around this
There's a
time?
very simple answer to that. It's called Rave. I was so caught up in the time of being like a DJ on the rave scene, you know, and we were doing these illegal parties every Friday, Saturday, Wednesday if we could, like, you know, and I'm open to talk about it now. It's not something that I'm ashamed of, but like, you know, when you're involved in that culture, what you have to realize is that, you know, there's a reason that people are still up at X time in the morning, loading speakers into vans, blah, blah, blah. It's a very big, you know, a lot of that culture revolves around drug taking. And I feel that during those 6 years, 7 years, I got really lost as a, you know, I didn't feel like I was an artist anymore. I did barely felt like a human, like, and I got completely swept up in, like, you know, just I partied too much. I did too much drugs and I drank too much. And that's that, you know, I'm not going to like sugarcoat that or beat around it and pretend it was anything else, you know. And at the time I was like blaming everybody but myself for my failures. But I'm very fortunate that over time and over quite a lot of struggle, you know, I managed to get back on track. And it's very hard to admit to yourself that you've wasted a lot of time, you know. You know, it's very easy for me to look back now and say, well, that was stupid, wasn't it? You know, but at the time, you know, I think a lot of life's progressions is real, you know, is fucking up, right? I value what I have today purely based on the low points of my life, because when you hit rock bottom, you know, it's very sobering thought to think, oh shit, you know, as much as say, well, drum and bass scene is, you know, it's mean to me and everyone's like, you know, but really my success I've had these last few years has purely been down to hard work, going to bed on time, you know, treating drum and bass like it's a job. Because, you know, I realized the people who are around me who were successful, they treated drum and bass like it was their 9 to 5. You know, they got up early in the morning, they wrote down, you know, the day's plans, and they, like you would do if you were at work. And as soon as I realized that my own failure was purely my own fault and accepted that and started being more responsible and treating drum and bass, you know, really as a goal and a passion, well, the proof's in the pudding. You know, the years that didn't go very well for me, I didn't try very hard, and the years that did go really well for me, I'm working my ass off. So it's quite simple logic when I say it out.
Well, I don't think anybody can blame you for that. I mean, obviously, as you said, you make these mistakes to learn, and obviously makes you a better person. And we've all had those blank spots. I myself included had a massive one as well, where I think I missed a lot of opportunity that I could have shined. But for you, what do you think the turning point was of that? You know, what made you say, look, like, draw a line in the sand, let's get serious again, let's jump on it?
I'll tell you what it was, mate. It was meeting my current girlfriend right now. Because as I'm sure people are aware, Beast Chain, the very successful DJ from the Czech Republic, has been my partner now for 2.5 years, which is over the majority of the time since I rebranded as Konquest. And we actually met at Cross Club in Czech Republic in Prague.
Love Cross Club.
Yeah,
Love
everybody. Who doesn't, mate? Who doesn't? So yeah, and that was during COVID. And one of my old promoters from Czech Republic, like, just messaged me randomly. I was in Bristol. I just had a tattoo. DJ Bish just gave me a tattoo. And he was like, "Oh, wake up, you ignorant twat. Like, I've been messaging you all night. It's like, I might be able to get you into Prague. Like during COVID, during lockdown." And I was just like, there's no fucking way. I was like, it's in 2 days. He was like, leave it with me. And he got Cross Club to write out this ridiculously long document that would allow me to enter the Czech Republic, because at the time there was only 3 types of people allowed to enter the Czech Republic, and that was diplomats, sports people, and artists, musical artists. And I was like, there's no fucking way that I'm going to be able to, you know. Anyway, 24 hours later, I received this document through the post, go through all the necessary processes, you know, get on the plane with more fucking documents than a lawyer in a court case, it felt like. And I was the only person in Prague airport. Literally, I was at border control. It was just me, like, going through. I just plonked this massive pile of documents down in front of border control, and he just looks down at the documents and looks back up at me and just shrugs and stamps my passport. And yeah, so I came in and I got to Cross Club, and my girlfriend Yaya Beast Jane, she was playing before me. She played a Liquid set outside in the daytime, and I just remember seeing her for the first time, and I was just like quite infatuated. And also, I'm coming back to the question. Sorry, I know I'm quite a long-winded way of answering this, but when I first saw her DJ, and I was like, holy shit, like, she's so much better than me.
She's an amazing DJ.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've had the pleasure of booking her for my night, and I saw her for the first time at Neuroheads. But she's obviously heavily involved in that Czech Republic scene, and rightly so as well. She's an amazing DJ. Do you bounce off her a lot with the talent that she's got with that as well?
Absolutely.
Does it help you and instigate you?
She made me realize that I need to step my game up, basically, because, you know, and obviously, being someone who fancied a girl who's into drum and bass as well, obviously I was like, well, there's only one way I'm going to impress her, and that's being better, you know, being better at what I do with my craft.
So there's a little bit of not rivalry, but there's a little bit of
definitely there's rivalry
there, yeah.
Oh, there's total rivalry between us, but it's a loving rivalry, you know.
Yeah,
it's not like, oh, I'm her biggest fan, obviously, you know. I'll do everything I can, and she does for me, to excel each other. But, you know, healthy you know, especially in our relationship, like, we're well aware that, you know, when one of us gets a certain achievement, the other one's like, right, I'm gonna out-achieve you, like, and it's all positive, you know. It's not toxic, it's super positive, because when something happens for me, you know, she's my biggest fan, I'm her biggest fan, we push each other. But yeah, it would be completely dishonest for me to say that we don't have a rivalry between us, but that is what excels our relationship as like a kind of DJ couple, is our competitiveness with each other. But also, like I said, we're always there for each other 100%.
And you guys do perform on a lot of the same stages now as well, don't you? I mean,
Yes.
just one worthwhile mention is obviously Darkshire in the Czech Republic. So for anybody watching, Darkshire, basically a huge event that's going on currently in the Czech Republic. It's run by, in my eyes, one of the best drum and bass promoters on the planet,
100%.
Thomas, and obviously his crew around him as well, and the other people involved. But for me, Thomas, he gave me my my second booking actually in the Czech Republic about 10 years ago, the first time I played for him, and that was for Imagination. So I played for Imagination, and I believe he's kind of moved that brand on and that now, but this is his baby now. And one thing I've noticed as well with Darkshire is that they do focus a lot on local talent. And you're one of the very few that's actually played at Darkshire as well. I think you're the only UK artist, in fact, aren't you? That's actually played that. So how did you actually link up with Thomas and those guys? By the way, big shout out to Thomas. Love you.
Big ups, Thomas. Big ups.
You are a legend.
Well, let me tell you now. I mean, what the Czech scene, because Neurofunk is so big over there, let me tell you now, like, getting in with those guys, just because I'm Beast Jane's boyfriend, it wasn't an automatic ticket. You know what I mean? Like, he has high standards, and, you know, his high standards ultimately is what has led to Darkshire's success. You know, just, he's not gonna be like, oh, you're from the UK and, you know, you're signed to this label, you automatically get a gig at my festival. You know, it's taken a lot of, you know, work and relationship building with those guys, and trust ultimately as well. Like, you know, I did the vocals for their opening ceremony for the last Darkshire festival in 2023, track with called We Are the Darkshire, with Not Equals and Meth, who are big ups, both of those guys, amazing producers. And, you know, even then, doing all that work, and I did because I do voices and stuff, like voiceovers and voice acting for a lot of festivals. They did it for Boomtown as well for 3 of their closing ceremonies. But even that contact and that relationship and working on that track, it wasn't an automatic booking to play at the festival. You know, like, his standards are so high, and he's actually, like you said, I respect him massively. He knows what he's doing, because when obviously my girlfriend Beast Jane, she plays at all the Darkshire events still. In fact, she is not this weekend, but the next in Brno in the south of Czech Republic. Every single one of those events I go to is crazy next level, like in organization, in production, you know, and on a not massively huge budget. You know, we're not talking boomtown budget here. Like they
You
on a
only have a couple of stages, don't they? And
yeah. But what
you
they
need
do
really.
have, they do it very well. Do you know what I mean? They're not like, oh right, let's just put 6 stages on unnecessarily with half-assed production. They put on what they know they can do to the absolute best of their ability. And I have yet to go to a Darkshire night and not just walk around going, wow, like this is so good. Like,
the stages are unreal. They're like nothing else. I mean, they've got that kind of theme going as well with it, haven't they? You know, with obviously everything with a what do you call it? It's almost like a portal to another world.
That
dimension stage thing that they use, and
I mean,
absolutely awesome.
I think as well, what sets them above the rest is their venue choice is very, very original. So they have every year they have particular parties. One is a boat party through the center of Prague. One is a church. You know, it's annually held at this big church in Prague. Last year they did one at a 400-year-old monastery, which was like a listed protected building. You know, they're very lucky that, you know, if you applied to do that in the UK, you know, it wouldn't even get past the front door. Oh, what do you mean? Where's it?
I see a lot of people. I mean, obviously, always hats off to Darkshire crew. That it's phenomenal what they're doing with the monastery. But let's not forget, it's not the first time. Club Birmingham, the big church. That's obviously a huge one.
And the custard factory as well.
Yeah. So things like that are obviously they're not a miss, you know. But we've done it before. We've got to give the UK some props.
But I feel like that's part of that is undoubtedly. Like I went to I played at a party at the custard factory, and I was like, "What the hell is going on? This is a massive multi-genre rave in a shopping center." Like, you know,
it is
that blew my mind. But I feel like the restrictions in the UK over the last decade, particularly, have just got out of control. I feel like promoters in this country are being strangled by rules and regulations and red tape to the point where it's just getting ridiculous now. So, you know, I feel very much for promoters like yourself inside this country, because it's just got harder and harder and harder. So I'm under no illusion that people are absolutely trying their best. But I will say that, you know, I've been to Let It Roll, and I have a lot of respect for those guys, etc. But I went to the Darkshire Festival for the first time last year in the summer of June, and I was blown away by the freedom of the feel of freedom. You know, it's in this mountainous forest with a big lake. There's not like tons of security like checking up on everyone constantly.
Very friendly as well. There's
very friendly.
Trouble at those raves.
No trouble. No trouble. You know, you get thousands of people in one place with hardly any security, but yet everybody manages to behave themselves. Like
it is. Yeah. and it's like that in quite a few places. I mean, Poland's good for it as well. Bulgaria, Romania. You don't really get much trouble at all, or see it at the raves. You know, I've never seen security have to handle anything in those. And I've been to hundreds and hundreds, and I've played all over Europe with it, but it's few and far between. They've got the right mindset, haven't they, for it? I think definitely.
100%. No,
they know what they've got, and they don't want to ruin it. I think that's one.
No, exactly that. I feel that's quite sad, isn't it? That especially in drum and bass culture, particularly, there's become like, you know, quite a lot of the aggressiveness of the, you know, because for example, like roadman culture, things like that, I've got like, it is very much a part of drum and bass, 100%. But like, I feel like sometimes that has spoilt the culture in England, where there's a lot of fights breaking out in clubs, and therefore there is, you know, the need for extra security, things like that. I can't safely say that we could maybe go about it the same way Darkshire do and pull it off without any trouble. I can't. No, I would love for that to be the case, but I don't think we quite have the same mentality they do.
It's hard to get rid of something that's kind of bred into us, isn't it? I mean, we've got 20 years of that bred in, and obviously the Czech kind of getting onto that maybe at a later stage, and Poland and stuff, they grew with a different mentality.
Of course.
Again, their music taste is very different as well, isn't it? So it's always going to come from that. I find the harder, nastier the music, the friendlier, the better the raves as well.
That's weird.
I used to go to Gabba raves, and it was one of the friendliest things you could ever do. Like.
Yeah, no, that's quite strange, that, isn't it? The nastier the music, the friendlier people are.
100% at the time. So talking about music then, your productions, obviously, since we've seen the Konquest name, we've taken it up to the next level. Obviously, you can hear that quite clearly. What are you using? What is your door of choice? Are you using hardware? What's your go-to synths? Tell us a little bit about the Konquest studio.
So well, it's actually quite a long time now. I actually started out on Reason for many years, Reason 3, because I knew that Audio used it at the time, and Gareth is like one of my all-time favorite producers. But then one day, one of my pals from Bristol, with Vandal, is a very famous hardcore and techno kind of hard producer. He suggested that I try out Studio One, and I'd never ever heard of it, and I was like, fuck it, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I opened up Studio One for the first time, and for me, I've just stuck with it ever since, and I really really enjoy it. It just vibes with me as a DAW to use, but it's quite unfortunate that most people are using Ableton these days, and you know, all the tutorials and the say if you want to subscribe to someone's Patreon or something like that, it's all focused around Ableton, which I get obviously because it's a great tool, but I've never if I opened Ableton I would be like Bambi, I wouldn't know what I'm doing. So I stick with Studio One, and that's what does me well. In terms of the rest of the studio, I mean, for my monitors, I love my Neumanns. I've got the KH310As, and you know, they're quite a lot of money, but for me they work just how I like them. I have
You can't skint on your speakers, can you?
nah. No. Well, I mean, I'm a massive tech freak anyway, like, so I have a very very powerful computer. For some reason, a few years back, I thought I was going to be like the next documentary filmmaker for some reason, so I invested in a very processor heavy computer to edit and render videos. But you know, as with all of my harebrained schemes, it turns out I was actually shit at it. So I was left with this really super powerful computer, which was really handy because as I started getting back into producing again heavily, and because I'm really into cinematic scoring, I have like a ridiculously NASA style processor that can handle these huge projects of like, you know, 150 contact libraries open at once. So one of my mistakes actually turned out later on in life to be a great benefit to me. But yeah, so at the moment, like, my studio is almost where I want it to be, but not quite.
What are you missing? What do you feel you're missing?
I feel bad saying this, but my next big purchase is definitely a new microphone, because the microphone I'm actually talking to you now on is the microphone used to record the vocals in Drown in Sin Sister. And you know, it's not the best microphone in the world. It's Audio Technica AT2020, but it's quite personal to me because it was given to me by one of my old housemates in London, in Tottenham, when he'd heard me sing. And you know, he'd heard me singing on guitar, and he was like, "Oh, and he worked for a big audio company, and he was like, I came home from work one day, and he's like, I just bought this microphone for you because he's like, I think you could take this somewhere." And this was fucking ages ago. This is like 10 years ago, and I still use this same microphone because, you know, this microphone's done 3 Boomtown closing ceremonies, you know, to 60,000 people, like, and it, you know, it's my little workhorse. So as much as I love it, I think it is time now, because now I'm up in my game and getting noticed by bigger labels. I think it's time to say goodbye to this one. But so yeah, my next big purchase is definitely a brand new microphone.
We're going to retire the drowning mic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll save it. I'll frame it. Maybe I'll put it on the wall.
Flatten it. Get you like we do with the flowers. Get it crushed down and flatten the mic.
Dried out and crushed
in a frame. Yeah, dry it out, crush it for your picture frame. So yeah, I mean, you've done it all, Matt. I mean, like I say, you've been involved in sound systems, events, DJing, obviously promoting, playing abroad. The only thing missing is the record label, and obviously we touched on this when we first started interacting a lot. So tell us a little bit about the label and what happened to it, and if it's going to be happening again in the future.
Well, I'll just straight up tell you now, it's not going to happen. But and do you know why? Because what I've come to realize is, as I've got more success and started working with more labels and guys like yourself, is that running a label is a fucking headache. And
you've got to love it or be absolutely nuts.
Yeah, you have to be 100% committed to it, like 24/7. So for example, I'm working heavily at the moment with James Magnitude, and like when I'm talking to him, he's like a fucking octopus. You know, he's got 7 other arms doing 7 other things at the same time, and somehow still managing to talk to me. And like, So when we came up with the idea of this label, it was during COVID, you know, when everyone's got loads of free time on their hands. So it was like, oh yeah, you know, and at the time when I had loads of free time, starting a label was like, oh, it's very plausible because I've got the time, I've got the brain power to process it. And then as soon as reality kicked back in, I realized that I just didn't have the time to be an artist and do all that and try and, you know, study for a new career, etc. And it gave me this whole newfound respect for label owners, because in my head, before I really understood how a label operated, I was like, you know, sign the track, send it to the distributor, whoop-de-doopy, make some money, like, you know. But then reality kicked in, and it's like, holy crap, there is so much sideline work that goes on underneath. You know, the general public think running a label is a piece of piss, but the reality is it's just a big nightmare.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my schedule goes 6 to 8 weeks before a release, and then you're doing promotional stuff a week before release, and maybe around 2, maybe 3 weeks after the release, and that's only if you've got an hectic schedule. I'm releasing 3 releases a month on a minimum of 3 labels there, and that's not including obviously when I'm helping other people.
I don't know how you do it, mate. How have you even got time for this fucking interview?
Well, I'm actually doing some stuff here on the computer, doing the octopus thing, and on here, so I've got 4 screens happening at the same time. But yeah, I mean, it's something I love, and you're right. Obviously, you do have to put a lot of commitment in, just like you do when you're a producer as well, you know. So I could swap that over and focus more on my production side, but it's one of those, when you're heavily involved in it as well and you're enjoying it, you see that route, and it's obviously brought me a lot of joy as well as headaches, as you can imagine. But you're right, there's so much little things in the background that people just don't really realize you have to do as a label. It's not about just having a bit of artwork, signing a track, putting it onto your distributor, and then it's out there.
I mean,
that is this 1 point of 100, isn't it?
A prime example is Jade, who runs Eatbrain, Gabor. He's a good friend of mine, and I understand, and I do not blame him in any way for this, because as I've become more aware and knowledgeable of how much effort it takes to run a label, as you know, they're about to bring out their Divergence 5, which features the track from me and Kaiser
2
Flow
parts as well.
Yeah, 2 parts, 60 artists, and you know, for example, he'll hate me for saying this. So, like, I messaged him in November, and he got back to me last week. And you know, I get it. He is a busy man, you know.
I've heard this story a million times. Everybody says the same.
Yeah, but you know, but that's the reality of running a label of that, you know, that caliber with that many people. Like, you know, I have to accept that that's my place in the queue, you know, and I get it. And what the more I see of it, the more I realize that I was not cut out to run a label.
Yeah, it is tough work. It is tough. So going forward, then, there's not going to be any label on the cards, but there is lots of music. What else is in store for Konquest in 2024 that you could let us know about?
Well, I'm sure by the time this comes out, it will actually be public news. But myself, Volatile Cycle, and Dropset, we have been working on collaborations over the last 6 months, with me primarily focusing around my vocal stuff. And in a way, like, Dropset's kind of stepped in to fill the role that Stephen Barbarics was doing before. And, you know, like I said, we have loads of love for Steve. It wasn't like it was the way we disbanded Fourth Order. It wasn't, there was no negative about it at all. You know, life just happened, right? You know,
well, you're gonna keep that name for when you do stuff with Steve, aren't you? You're not, you know,
well, I mean,
he's not kicked out.
No, not of course not at all. But I mean, at the end of the day, I am, you know, I still follow Steve closely on socials. You know, you know, especially over the last 6 months, it seems like all of a sudden it's all kicking off for him now. You know, writing the music he's writing in Garage and House, and we're all very, you know, we're happy to see him succeed. There's no animosity between us whatsoever. But in going forwards, Dropset has really stepped in, and yeah, we've got some amazing vocal releases coming up on Evolution Chamber. And let me tell you now, I'm about to road test them this weekend. Well, my girlfriend's about to road test them in Dresden in Germany, and Brno next week in the Czech Republic. But yeah, these projects are definitely the best and most exciting thing I've ever been a part of, because it's super heavy drum and bass by some of, you know, the best in my opinion, the best people in the industry at the minute, and it's helping me take my creative side of me, like because when I write drum and bass track myself on my own, I have to do all the technical, all of this, but this role in the trio group of us at the minute has they give me all the creative freedom to do my lyrics, my vocals, how I want them, and then the tune will be written around it. You know what I mean? Like, so I have so much more time to focus on the musicality and creative freedom, which is what I was originally brought into this scene in the first place on, than dealing with all the nitty gritty of, does this snare sound correct? Does this sound right? I still do all that stuff in my own productions, obviously, but this for me has been a breath of fresh air, that I now get to do what I love the most and still produce some of the best drum and bass I've ever done. So it's really exciting. The future is looking good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm loving your vocals on these tracks at the minute. So any more that's even remotely like those two that we've got out there is going to make me happy.
I'll give you a sneak peek after this.
So we've also got a little DJ mix coming in from you as well to go out with this podcast. What can we expect to hear in the mix?
Well, depending on what my label managers say, you might be able to hear some. Well, I will have a discussion with them actually after this interview, because I know that Joe Ford is currently working on some of our masters, which we actually get back tomorrow, which is why I've been waiting to record this mix for you, because I know that we get the masters back on 2 very exciting tunes tomorrow, which I would like to include. So fingers crossed, you're going to hear this new project from me and Volatile Cycle and Drop Set.
So if you're listening to this podcast at the same time, obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify, go check out the Dirtbox Recordings SoundCloud. You'll find the latest mix on the In Your House series by Konquest, what we're talking about here. Give it a listen, give it a share, get it out there to your friends. This is some proper nan-slapping stuff that we want you to be aware of. Go grab it, guys. So we're going to leave with a few quick fire questions now, Matt.
Yep.
I'm going to shoot these at you, and I just want you, they don't have to be one-word answers, but I kind of want you to give the first thing that comes to mind when I
be specific, right?
Yeah. Okay. So first quick fire question. What is your go-to restaurant?
Oh my goodness. It's got to be Wagamama.
Wagamama, right. Yeah. Why do you like Wagamama?
I know it's obviously not exactly traditionally Asian food, but like I went to Japan a few years ago on a soul searching thing, and I just fell in love with Asian food, like massively. And obviously where I live now in East Anglia, we don't exactly have the greatest culture, but like, so that's as close as I can get to the food I really like that's next to my house.
I think my favorite Wagamama is the number 52. That's where
it's got to be the oh my god, what's the really firecracker chicken, mate? Spicier the better.
Yeah. Banging, that is absolutely banging. Okay, a bit more on topic then. Name me, and it doesn't have to just be one, but what's your favorite drum and bass track at the minute that's not yours?
Oh, you can't ask me that question, because
well, give us an idea of one that you're fully digging. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but one of many drum and bass tracks you're fully digging at the minute that you've got.
I'm not gonna lie, right? Do you know who one of my favorite emerging producers at the minute that I'm listening to massively is? I can't actually tell you the name of the track yet because it's not out, but if you keep your eye on Ziggy SC, like some of the tracks that I've been in contact with him the last couple of years, the stuff he's making at the minute has just gone levels basically. And I would love to actually, I can't actually tell you the name of the track because it's probably not right to, but keep your eye out for Ziggy SC because he's got some huge stuff coming up at the minute.
I've heard a couple of his tracks, obviously, that he's sent across, and a couple of dubs as well. And he's again one of that Czech Republic scene who's about to blow up, isn't he? He's doing some great stuff.
Oh yeah, he's going to be huge.
Anybody else in the UK you think we should be looking out for?
Oh man, again, like I'd love to really off a list, but like for me, the producers that, and I'm sorry if I forget anyone's names, but like Transformer, I know he's actually originally Australian, but he's about to move back to the UK. So we've got Transformer, Kaizen Flow, Shaper, all my friends. Like obviously Volatile Cycle, I gravitate towards all those people who are my friends, like, and because I'm very interested and excited for their music, like we were talking about earlier. Just quickly, like the UK does have a huge variety of amazing drum and bass neurofunk producers who get overlooked because unfortunately we live in the UK. But big ups to all my UK neurofunk producers out there, because there's a hell of a lot of them. So, and I'm sorry if I forgot everyone's name. He's put me on the spot.
I know I did it on purpose, but no, I didn't. Yeah, there's a lot of names out there, obviously too many to mention, but they're all on the radar for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we've not got your favorite drum and bass track, what is your favorite non-drum and bass track? And it can be anything in history. Is there anything that that always goes in the playlist that's not drum and bass?
Blimey. It's got to be a Radiohead track. Me. Like, do you know, Tom York is one of my biggest inspirations of all time. Like, I absolutely love Radiohead. So I think it's got to be Street Spirit by Radiohead is probably one of my all-time favorite tracks.
Play Radiohead did probably to me the best music video ever made with a guy lying on the street. I can't remember.
Yeah. What's that called? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, with a guy lying down. Hold on.
Right at the end of the video, and it zooms out, it pans out, and there's loads of people lying on the floor because they keep asking him questions. Why are you lying on the floor?
Yeah, so basically they say, "Why are you lying there? Why are you lying?" He's like, "I can't tell you." And then at the end, they all come in because obviously the music's playing and there's captions on the video. So they stop the captions when he tells them. And it's called Just. It's called
Yeah,
Just.
that's it. Yeah.
So yeah, he oh, hold on. Is it called Just?
I honestly can't remember the name of it.
Radiohead.
As Yaya will tell you, sorry, I have the worst memory going. So
I know. I'm just having a look. I can edit all this out. Radiohead video, guy laid on pavement. Let's see. Yeah, it must be Just because that's all that's coming up. Yeah, it's Just. Go and check it out. Amazing music video. So if you weren't producing drum and bass, what music do you think you'd be producing if you were still a producer, of course?
If I wasn't making drum and bass, do you know what? I think I would definitely be focusing all my time into cinematic and game writing music, classical cinematic intros. That is where my heart lies, to be honest with you. Like I have actually got some projects going on in the background right now that I wish I could give more time to. You know, if I woke up tomorrow and drum and bass had disappeared from the planet, like it would give me so much more time to focus on my more emotional pieces, like classical music, to be honest with you. Not traditional classic. I'm not going to say I'm going to go and be the next Mozart, but I love anything to do with strings, violins, piano. You know, that's the kind of, I worked in the music industry as an audio engineer at the Royal Albert Hall. So I've worked with loads of big classical orchestras from all over the world. So for me, I think if I wasn't doing drum and bass, I would do the complete opposite.
Orchestra. That's interesting, and definitely we should touch on that on our next interview. I think that's very interesting. You dark horse. I didn't know that. Final question, Matt. Who do you think I should interview next on my show? Who would make a good interview? Is where I'm going with that. You know, some people just don't make a good bloody interview, unfortunately. And trust me, I know a few.
I have got some of my most technically able friends in drum and bass, more so even than me, would probably be quite boring interview. Because, you know that, but then I also have friends who are too wild maybe for your show. So I think it would be interesting to learn about, like we were touching on earlier, some of the other neurofunk producers from the UK. I'm not actually sure who you've had on the show recently, but I think two interesting ones for me would either be Transformer or Kaizen Flow.
Yeah, I am definitely on the cards. I think Neil's definitely got a story, hasn't he?
Oh, he's got a huge story.
In between two places. So, you know, for me, I'm looking for obviously experience, and he definitely does tick the box. I did a little interview with him for Neuroheads last year, but it was only a little one about his release. But yeah, maybe I could sort something out.
Well, I'll tell you what's quite funny, right? In my girlfriend's bedroom back in the Czech Republic, like the first time I ever went to her house to meet her parents, I looked up on the wall and there's a gig, the first ever night she ever put on, and Transformers headlining. And I was like, "You're friends with Neil?" She was like, "Yeah." So, you know, Neil's got the experience, you know, being from Australia, you know, he's constantly backwards and forwards all around the world. So I think even I would like to hear that interview, even though he's one of my best friends.
I tell you as well, the only thing with Neil, he's got the dad vibe when it comes to interviews. So when I got him on the interview for the Neurohead show, I'll send you the link to this. He had the phone the long way round, and he's pointing at the ceiling. So I'm like, hold on, Neil, like teaching me dad how to use a camera and a phone. You know, he can make banging neurofunk, but if you
Neil is Neil's a technical genius when it comes to making neurofunk, but I might have to be there to prompt him for the interview. Sit with him.
Yeah, and we'll have to teach him how to turn on a camera as well. That's because he gives off the dad vibes when it comes to that one.
Yeah.
Listen, mate, I'm not going to take up any more time, especially on your birthday. Happy birthday, Matt.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much,
this was
mate.
a nice start to your day, and
Yes, it was.
hopefully lots of birthday treats are coming your way this afternoon.
I'm gonna
Just
go do
wanna-
my best. Sorry, mate. I'm gonna go do my best not to stuff my face. That's what.
No, stuff your face. You've got one day a year to do it, mate. And Christmas, of course, as well. So make sure you're doing that and have a great time with it. Don't forget, everybody, Konquest's latest track is available now. It's a collaboration with Impex on Evolution Chamber. It's called Sin City. It's one of my favorites at the moment. You need to go and stream it and buy it on download. He's got a forthcoming track on Eatbrain, which probably will be dropping very soon after this interview. Any more plugs, Matt?
It's Sin Sister.
Sin Sister. Oh, I called it Sin City, didn't I? I'll edit it in. Sin City. There we go.
Right. No,
Nice
thank you
one for
very
that,
much,
dude.
mate. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been great speaking to you.
You too, buddy. Thanks for all that. Speak to you
Thanks,
soon.
mate.
Take care.
Bye.